The crash of crystal against marble silenced the room instantly. 50 of New York's most powerful people froze, their eyes darting from the spilled champagne to the trembling waitress standing in the center of the executive suite. But Ilara wasn't looking at the mess she'd made. She was staring past the billionaire, Silas Thorne, at the massive oil painting hanging above his mahogany desk. The man in the painting had kind eyes, a slightly crooked nose, and a grey suit Ilara remembered smelling like sawdust and rain. It was a face she had grieved for 15 years. Ilara raised a shaking finger, ignoring the security guards rushing toward her. "Sir," her voice trembled, yet it carried a terrifying weight. "Why is my father in your office portrait?" Silas Thorne, the man who owned half the city, didn't yell. He didn't scoff. He turned a deathly shade of pale and dropped his whiskey glass. Ilara Vance adjusted the collar of her stiff white uniform, the fabric scratching against her neck. It was 6 p.m. on a biting November Tuesday in Manhattan, and the wind whipping down Fifth Avenue felt personal. She checked her reflection in the darkened window of the service entrance. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, stubborn shadows that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. At 24, she felt 40. "Move it, Vance. We aren't being paid to admire ourselves," barked Marco, the catering manager for Elite Serve, a staffing agency that specialized in making people like Ilara invisible, so people like Silas Thorne could feel important. "I'm coming, Marco," Ilara muttered, grabbing a crate of chilled, sparkling water. Tonight was the Obsidian Gala, an ultra-private event hosted at the headquarters of Thorne Dynamics. The building loomed above them, a jagged shard of black glass piercing the sky. Silas Thorne wasn't just a billionaire. He was an institution. He was the tech mogul who had revolutionized renewable energy batteries in the late 90s. He was the man on the cover of Forbes, Time, and Fortune, usually accompanied by headlines like "The Man Who Saved the Grid" or "The $1 trillion Visionary." To Ilara, he was just the guy paying the bill that would cover her rent this month. She hauled the crate into the service elevator, the heavy steel doors sliding shut to seal her in with the smell of floor polish and anxiety. Her life had been a series of these service elevators since she was 9 years old. That was the year her father, Julian, had disappeared. One day he was there, sketching inventions on napkins at the dinner table, promising Ilara and her mother that their big break was coming. The next day, the police were at the door, talking about a car accident, a bridge, and a body swept out to sea that was never recovered. Her mother had withered away from grief and overwork 3 years later, leaving Ilara to navigate the foster system alone. She had nothing of her father left, no photos, no trinkets, just the memory of his laugh and the specific way his nose crinkled when he was thinking hard. The elevator dinged at the 50th floor, the penthouse suite. "Listen up," Marco hissed to the team of 12 servers. "This isn't a wedding in Queens. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. Keep the glasses full. Keep the hors d'oeuvres circling. Mr. Thorne is concluding a merger tonight that is worth more than the GDP of a small country. If you drop so much as a napkin, you are fired before it hits the floor." "Understood?" "Understood," they chorused. The doors opened, revealing a world that dripped with gold and malice. The room was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park, currently a dark void amidst the city lights. Men in tuxedos that cost more than Ilara's yearly income swirled cognac in crystal snifters. Women in silk gowns laughed with practiced elegance. Ilara took a tray of smoked salmon blinis and stepped into the fray. She moved like a ghost, weaving through the clusters of power brokers. "The battery tech is revolutionary," a man with a thick mustache was saying near the bar. "Thorne says he developed the prototype in '98. The man is a genius." A shark, more like, his companion replied, chuckling. He ate his competition alive. Elara ignored them, her feet aching in her cheap black flats. She approached a group near the fireplace, offering the tray. A woman with diamond earrings waved her away without looking at her. Elara was used to it. In this world, she was furniture. Around 8 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The double doors to the inner sanctum, Silas Thorne's private office, swung open. Silas himself stepped out. He was a striking man in his early 60s, with silver hair slicked back and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He exuded an aura of absolute control. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas boomed, his voice smooth and baritone, "if you would join me in the study, the signing will take place beneath the eyes of the company's history." The crowd migrated toward the office. Marco signaled frantically to Elara. "Vance! Champagne! Now! Get in there and be ready for the toast!" Elara grabbed a fresh tray of crystal flutes, the bubbly liquid fizzing gently. She kept her head down, following the flow of expensive cologne and perfume into the private office. The office was a library of mahogany and leather. It smelled of old paper and Cuban cigars. In the center of the room sat a massive desk, and behind it, dominating the entire back wall, was a portrait. It was huge, at least 6 feet tall. It depicted 2 men standing side by side in a garage, surrounded by wires and half-built circuit boards. The man on the left was clearly a younger Silas Thorne, sharp, hungry, looking at the camera with intense ambition. But the man on the right? Elara was pouring champagne for a senator when she looked up. Her hand froze. The bottle kept tilting, spilling expensive vintage brut onto the senator's polished shoes. But Elara didn't notice. The man on the right in the painting was laughing. He held a soldering iron like a conductor's baton. He had messy brown hair, a slightly crooked nose, and a warmth that radiated even through the canvas. Elara stopped breathing. The tray in her other hand began to tremble. The room's chatter faded into a dull roar, like static on a radio. "Dad?" The word screamed in her mind, but her throat was paralyzed. It was impossible. Her father was a failed mechanic, a dreamer who never finished anything. That's what the police said. That's what the social workers said. Julian Vance was a nobody. So why was he immortalized in oil paint, standing shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful man in New York, in the headquarters of a billion-dollar empire? "You clumsy idiot!" The senator's shout broke the spell. Elara snapped back to reality, realizing she had just poured champagne over a man who likely had the power to have her arrested for breathing wrong. The room went silent. Marco was already sprinting toward her, his face purple with rage. "Vance, what are you doing? Get out! Get out now!" But Elara didn't move. She couldn't. She shoved the champagne bottle into the senator's chest, who caught it instinctively, and took a step toward the desk. "Elara, stop!" Marco hissed, grabbing her arm. She shook him off with a strength she didn't know she possessed. She walked past the stunned guests, her eyes locked on the painting. She had to be sure. She had to be closer. Silas Thorne was standing by the desk, a fountain pen in his hand, ready to sign the merger documents. He looked up, annoyed by the commotion. "Security," he said calmly. "Remove this woman." 2 large men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the room. Elara stopped 10 feet from the desk. She looked at the painting, then down at Silas. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The man in the painting wore a silver watch on his left wrist, a cheap, bulky thing with a cracked face. Elara remembered playing with that watch. She remembered the sound the bezel made when she turned it. Click, click, click. She felt tears prick her eyes, hot and sudden. "Sir," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the pin-drop silence of the room, it was deafening. Silas frowned, pausing his hand over the paper. "Young woman, you are making a scene. Leave with some dignity." Ilara pointed a trembling finger at the canvas. "That man," she choked out. "The one on the right. Who is he?" A ripple of confused murmurs went through the crowd. Why would a waitress care about the decor? Silas's expression didn't change, but his grip on the pen tightened until his knuckles turned white. "That is an old associate. He passed away years ago. Now security." "He's not just an associate," Ilara interrupted, her voice rising, fueled by a sudden volcanic anger. "That's Julian Vance. That's my father." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Silas Thorne froze. For a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes widened, his jaw went slack, and the blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He stared at Ilara, really looked at her. For the first time, he looked at her jawline, her eyes. He saw the ghost. "Vance," he whispered, barely audible. "My name is Ilara Vance," she said, standing taller, though her knees were shaking. "You said he died in a car accident. The police said he was a nobody. But he's up there, on your wall. Why is my father in your office portrait, Mr. Thorne?" The guests were exchanging glances. Phones were being pulled out. This was drama. This was scandal. Silas recovered his composure instantly, the mask of the CEO slamming back into place. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "This is absurd," Silas announced to the room, gesturing dismissively. "Clearly this poor girl is mistaken. Perhaps she sees a resemblance to a lost relative and is projecting. Grief does strange things to the mind." He turned to the head of security, a man named Graves. "Get her out, and make sure she is banned from the building. She is clearly unstable." "I'm not unstable," Ilara shouted as Graves grabbed her arm. "That's him. He has the scar on his chin from where he fell off a bike in '92. Look at the painting. I know my own father." "Get her out," Silas roared, his voice cracking just slightly. Graves and another guard dragged Ilara backward. She fought, her heels skidding on the Persian rug. "What did you do to him?" she screamed, the desperation taking over. "If he was your partner, why did we starve? Why did he die with nothing?" The heavy oak doors slammed shut in her face, cutting off her screams. She was hauled down the corridor, past the gawking staff. Marco was walking beside the guards, looking terrified. "You're done, Vance. You are so done. You'll never work in this city again." They didn't take her to the elevator. They took her to a service stairwell. Graves shoved her through the door. "Don't come back," Graves said, his voice low and dangerous. "Mr. Thorne is a forgiving man, but he doesn't like liars. Go home, little girl. Before you get into trouble you can't get out of." The door clicked locked. Ilara stood in the cold, concrete stairwell, gasping for air. Her uniform was disheveled, her hair coming loose from its bun. She was shaking violently. But beneath the fear, something else was igniting. A fire. She reached into her apron pocket. Her hand closed around her phone. Just before the guards had grabbed her, in that split second of chaos when everyone was looking at Silas, Ilara had done something instinctive. She pulled the phone out. Her hands were trembling, but the image on the screen was clear. She had snapped a photo of the portrait. She zoomed in on the man on the right, Julian Vance, her dad. And there, resting on the workbench in the painting, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a stack of blueprints. The text on the corner of the blue paper was blurry, but legible. Project Ether. Primary inventor J. Vance. Ilara slumped against the concrete wall and slid down to the floor. Primary inventor. she whispered to the empty stairwell. Silas Thorne hadn't just known her father. He had stolen everything from him, and Ilara was going to make him pay it back. Every single cent. Ilara was fired before she even left the building. Marco sent her a text. "Don't bother coming to the office for your check. We'll mail it. Lose my number." She walked the 40 blocks back to her tiny studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen. It was a shoebox with a leaking radiator and a window that looked out onto a brick wall, costing her $1,800 a month. She sat on her futon, staring at the photo on her phone until her battery dipped to 10%. She needed proof. A painting wasn't enough. Silas would just say he commissioned it as a tribute to a minor assistant. She needed something concrete. She dragged a battered cardboard box out from under her bed. It was the only thing she had kept from her mother's belongings. Most of it was junk. Old utility bills, a few greeting cards. But at the bottom, wrapped in a moth-eaten scarf, was her father's old leather journal. She had tried to read it years ago, but it was full of technical jargon and equations she didn't understand, so she had put it away. Now she opened it with new eyes. She flipped through the pages. 1997. The capacity issue is solved. The lithium matrix is stable. 1998. Silas is pushing for a patent. He says we need to incorporate. He wants to call it Thorne and Vance. I told him I don't care about the name, I just want the tech to work. Ilara's heart hammered. Thorne and Vance. There was no Vance in Thorne Dynamics. She turned to the last entry, dated 2 days before he disappeared. The handwriting was messy, rushed. Silas is acting strange. He moved the prototypes to a private storage facility without telling me. He's asking about my copies of the schematics. I have a bad feeling. If anything happens, I've put the master copy and the original deed in the safety deposit box at First National. Box 404. The key is in the lining of my grey suit jacket. Ilara gasped. The grey suit. The suit he was wearing in the painting, but the suit was gone. Her father had disappeared wearing his work clothes. The police never found the body, which meant they never found the clothes. Or... She closed her eyes, thinking back. After the police had declared him dead, they had given her mother a box of personal effects found in his locker at the garage he rented. Ilara scrambled to the closet. She tore through her winter coats. In the back, covered in plastic, was an old, dusty grey suit jacket. Her mother had kept it because it still smelled like him. Ilara had kept it because she couldn't bear to throw it away. She pulled the jacket down, dust motes dancing in the dim light. Her fingers traced the lining. It felt smooth, empty. No, please. She felt along the bottom hem. There, a small, hard lump. She grabbed a pair of scissors from her desk and snipped the fabric. A small brass key slid out into her palm. It was tarnished, old-fashioned. The number stamped on it was barely visible. 404. You knew, Ilara whispered, clutching the key. You knew he was coming for you. The next morning, Ilara walked into First National Bank. It was an old building, one of the few that hadn't been modernized. She approached the teller, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Higgins. I have a key for a box, Ilara said, sliding the brass key across the marble counter. It belonged to my father, Julian Vance. Mrs. Higgins adjusted her glasses. Box 404? That hasn't been accessed in 20 years, dear. We were about to drill it open for auction next month. You're lucky. Ilara's hands shook as she signed the paperwork. She was led into the vault. The air was cool and smelled of money. When Mrs. Higgins unlocked the box and slid the long metal drawer out, Ilara held her breath. Inside there was no money, no gold, just a thick manila envelope and a cassette tape. Ilara took the envelope. She opened it right there in the viewing room. It contained a patent application, fully approved, dated 1998. The title, High Efficiency Lithium-Ion Energy Storage System. Inventor, Julian Vance. Assignee, Julian Vance. There was no mention of Silas Thorne, and underneath that, a contract, a partnership agreement between Silas Thorne and Julian Vance, stating a 50-50 split of all assets and intellectual property. Silas hadn't invented the battery. He hadn't even co-invented it. He had stolen it. He had likely killed for it. Elara put the documents back in the envelope. She looked at the cassette tape. She didn't have a player, but she knew she had to hear what was on it. She left the bank, the envelope pressed against her chest like a shield. She stepped out onto the street, the cold wind hitting her face. A black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the curb right in front of her. The back door flew open. "Get in, Miss Vance," a voice said. It was Graves, the head of security. Elara turned to run, but another man blocked her path from behind. "Mr. Thorne wants to have breakfast," Graves said, stepping out of the car. He wasn't smiling. "And he is very insistent." Elara sat in the back of the SUV, the leather seat cool against her legs. The windows were tinted so dark that the city outside was nothing but a blur of grey shadows. Beside her, Graves sat like a statue, his hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead. He hadn't confiscated the envelope yet. That terrified her more than if he had. It meant they weren't afraid of what she had. They were confident they could take it whenever they wanted. The car didn't go to Thorne Tower. Instead, it wove through the streets of the Upper East Side, pulling up to the curb in front of Le Jardin, a French bistro that Elara knew by reputation only. It was the kind of place where a cup of coffee cost $20, and the wait list was 6 months long. "Out," Graves said. He escorted her through the front door. The restaurant was closed to the public, the chairs inverted on tables, except for one booth in the far corner where golden light spilled from a vintage sconce. Silas Thorne was waiting. He wasn't wearing the tuxedo from the night before. He wore a cashmere turtleneck and a blazer that looked soft enough to sleep in. He was buttering a croissant with the precision of a surgeon. "Miss Vance," Silas said, not rising. He gestured to the empty seat opposite him. "Please. The coffee is Jamaican Blue Mountain. It would be a crime to let it get cold." Elara clutched the manila envelope to her chest and sat down. She felt filthy in her day-old clothes, her hair messy, facing a man who looked like he had been exfoliated with diamond dust. "I went to the bank," Elara said, skipping the pleasantries. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Silas paused, the butter knife hovering. He looked at the envelope in her arms. A flicker of something, annoyance, fear, passed behind his eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "I see," Silas said smoothly. "And I assume you found Julian's old ramblings?" "I found a patent," Elara corrected, her voice gaining a hard edge, "and a partnership agreement. 50-50. You didn't just know him, Mr. Thorne. You were his partner. And you stole everything." Silas sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He set the knife down and wiped his hands on a linen napkin. "Elara. May I call you Elara? You are very young. You don't understand how business works, or how the world works." "I understand theft," she snapped. "Julian was a genius," Silas admitted. The admission took Elara by surprise. He was brilliant, but he was also fragile. He couldn't sell water to a man dying of thirst. He was paranoid, disorganized, and frankly, a liability. When he died, the company was nothing but debt and prototypes that exploded. "The patent says he invented it," Elara insisted. "And I built the empire that sold it." Silas leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. They were cold, pale blue, like ice on a deep lake. Without me, that patent would be a piece of paper in a dusty box. I did the work. I took the risks, and yes, I reaped the rewards. That is nature, Elara. The strong eat, the weak are eaten. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He unscrewed a fountain pen, the same heavy black pen from the night before. I am a generous man, Silas said. I feel a certain responsibility toward Julian's offspring. I am prepared to buy that envelope from you, as a sentimental keepsake. He scribbled on the check, ripped it out, and slid it across the table. Elara looked down. The number was staggering. $5 million. It was more money than she could imagine. It was freedom. It was a house, a car, a life where she never had to serve another tray of champagne to ungrateful rich people again. It was safety. Take it, Silas whispered, his voice seductive. Walk away. Live a good life. Julian is dead, Elara. Nothing will bring him back. Why suffer for a ghost? Elara's hand trembled as she reached for the check. Her fingertips brushed the paper. For a second she considered it. Who was she fighting for? A father she barely remembered? A man who left her alone? Then she remembered the painting, the way her father looked at Silas in the photo, with trust, with friendship, and she remembered the look on Silas's face when she had pointed at the wall. It wasn't sadness. It was guilt. She picked up the check. Smart girl, Silas smiled. Elara looked him in the eye, crumpled the check into a tight ball, and dropped it into his coffee cup. The dark liquid splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. The smile vanished from Silas's face instantly. My father wasn't fragile, Elara said, her voice shaking but loud. He was trustful, and you betrayed him. I don't want your money, Silas. I want your name. I want everyone to know that the great Silas Thorne is a fraud. She stood up. I'm leaving. Silas didn't move. He stared at the ruining coffee. You are making a mistake, Miss Vance, a fatal one. Is that a threat? It's a forecast, Silas said coldly. You have documents. Good for you. Lawyers will bury you in paperwork for 20 years. You'll run out of money in a month. You are a waitress fighting a god. You won't win. We'll see, Elara said. She turned and walked toward the door. She expected Graves to stop her. She expected to be grabbed. But Silas just sat there. Let her go, Silas called out to Graves, who was standing by the door. Elara pushed past the security chief and burst out onto the sidewalk. She began to run. She ran until her lungs burned, dodging tourists and taxis, clutching the envelope so tight her knuckles turned white. Back in the bistro, Silas pulled his phone out. He dialed a number. She didn't take the deal, he said, watching the steam rise from his coffee. She has the papers, and she has a key to a box. No, she already went to the bank. Graves saw her leave with the envelope. She has the tape. He listened for a moment. No, Silas said. Don't kill her yet. If she dies today, it looks suspicious after the scene at the gala. She needs to be discredited first. Destroy her reputation. Make her look like a lunatic. And find out where she's going. I want that tape before she plays it for anyone who matters. Elara knew she couldn't go home. Her apartment would be the first place they looked. They probably already had someone there, tearing through her meager belongings. She ducked into a crowded Starbucks on 42nd Street, hiding in the back corner near the bathrooms. She bought a tea she didn't drink just to use the Wi-Fi. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type on her cracked phone screen. She searched. Silas Thorne lawsuits, millions of results. Most were boring corporate disputes. She searched. Silas Thorne enemies, gossip columns, business rivals. Then she tried something different. She searched. Who hates Silas Thorne? A forum thread popped up from a legal blog. The tragedy of Cross and Sons. She clicked it. It detailed the collapse of a prestigious law firm 10 years ago. The senior partner, Marcus Cross, had represented a whistleblower against Thorne Dynamics regarding environmental dumping. 2 weeks before the trial, Marcus Cross was disbarred on fabricated bribery charges. He committed suicide a month later. The firm dissolved. The article mentioned his son, Liam Cross, currently operating a pro bono legal clinic in the Bronx. Ilara looked up the address. The Cross Legal Aid Center. It was far. It was in a rough neighborhood. It was perfect. She took the subway, switching trains 3 times just in case, constantly checking over her shoulder. Every man in a suit looked like graves. Every black SUV looked like a hearse. She arrived in the Bronx as the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows over the cracked sidewalks. The address led her to a run-down storefront, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a liquor store. The sign above the door was peeling, L. Cross, attorney at law. She pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The office was a disaster zone. Stacks of files towered on every surface like paper skyscrapers. The air smelled of stale coffee and old takeout. Behind a desk buried under a mountain of paperwork sat a man. He looked about 30, with messy dark hair that clearly hadn't seen a comb in days. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing a tattoo on his forearm, and he had the tired, cynical eyes of a man who had seen too much bad luck. He didn't look up from the file he was reading. "We're closed. If you're here for the tenant dispute class action, sign the sheet by the door." "I'm not here for a tenant dispute," Ilara said. "Drug charge? I don't do criminal anymore. Try the guy down the block." "I'm here about Silas Thorne." Liam Cross froze. He slowly lowered the file. He looked at Ilara, really looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "Get out," he said flatly. "What?" "I said get out. If you're a reporter, I have no comment. If you're one of his spies sent to see if I'm still kicking, tell him I'm miserable, so he wins. Now go." "I'm not a spy." Ilara walked forward, slamming the manila envelope onto his desk. Dust flew up. "I'm the waitress." Liam paused. "The waitress? The one who crashed the Obsidian Gala?" "News travels fast," Ilara muttered. "It was on Twitter," Liam smirked, though the humor didn't reach his eyes. "Trending topic. Like champagne girl. Everyone thinks you're crazy." "I'm not crazy," Ilara said. "Silas Thorne stole his company from my father, and I have proof." Liam leaned back in his creaking chair, crossing his arms. "Everyone thinks they have proof against Thorne. Emails, memos. He has a team of 50 lawyers who turn proof into confetti. Unless you have a signed confession, you're wasting my time." "I have a patent," Ilara said, "and a partnership agreement." Liam's eyebrows shot up. He sat forward and opened the envelope. He scanned the documents. His casual demeanor evaporated. He pulled a pair of reading glasses from his pocket and scrutinized the signatures. "Holy hell," he whispered. "This is real. The dates. This predates the incorporation of Thorne Dynamics." "There's more," Ilara said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the cassette tape. "My father left this in the box. He died 2 days after he hid it." Liam stared at the plastic tape. "A cassette? You're kicking it old school. Do you have a player?" "I'm a lawyer in a basement in the Bronx. Of course I have old junk." He rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a dusty Walkman. He popped the tape in and plugged in a small set of speakers. "Ready?" he asked. Ilara nodded, gripping the edge of the desk. Liam pressed play. Static hissed through the speakers. Then, a voice. A man's voice. Warm, tired, and scared. "My name is Julian Vance. If you are listening to this." Then I am dead. Ilara put a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. It was him. It was the voice that used to read her bedtime stories. Silas has changed, the voice continued. The money, the attention, it warped him. He wants to sell the technology to the military. He wants to put my battery, my clean energy source, into guided missiles. I told him no. I told him I'd burn the blueprints first. There was a pause on the tape, the sound of Julian taking a shaky breath. He threatened me today. He told me that accidents happen, that people disappear. I know he's tampered with the prototype car. I found cut lines on the brake fluid casing this morning. I didn't tell him I found them. I'm going to confront him tomorrow. But if I don't come home, it was Silas. He did it. He wants the Ether Project, and he's willing to kill me for it. The tape clicked off. Silence filled the small, messy office. Liam Cross was staring at the Walkman, his face pale. He looked up at Ilara, and the cynicism was gone. In its place was a burning, cold fury. That's not just theft, Liam said quietly. That's premeditated murder. Can we use it? Ilara asked, her voice trembling. Is it enough? In a court of law? Maybe. But Thorne will tie it up for years. He'll claim the tape is a deep fake, or that your father was mentally ill and paranoid. Liam stood up and began pacing the small room. The law is slow, Ilara, and Thorne is fast. If he knows you have this, you have maybe 24 hours before he tries something drastic. He offered me $5 million to walk away, Ilara said. Liam laughed bitterly. That means he's scared. He's terrified. He stopped pacing and looked at a calendar on the wall. The shareholders' meeting. What? Thorne Dynamics' annual shareholder meeting is in 2 days, Liam said, a dangerous glint in his eye. It's being held at the Javits Center, live-streamed to millions. Press from all over the world, investors. So, Liam slammed his hand on the desk. We don't go to the police. The police are on his payroll. We don't go to a judge. We go to the public. We play that tape, show those documents, and expose him in front of the entire world. We don't just sue him, Ilara. We destroy him. Ilara felt a surge of adrenaline. How do we get in? I'm banned from every Thorne property. Liam grinned, a wolfish, predatory grin. I know a guy who works catering, and you, my dear, are a waitress. Suddenly, the glass of the front window shattered. A brick sailed through the air, crashing into the filing cabinets. Ilara screamed and ducked. Liam was already moving. He grabbed Ilara's arm and pulled her down behind the desk. Stay down! Outside, tires screeched. Liam peeked over the desk. Tied to the brick was a note. He reached out and untied it. It was a single piece of expensive cream-colored cardstock. The handwriting was elegant. Last warning. He found us, Ilara whispered, terror gripping her throat. Yeah, Liam said, looking at the shattered glass. He did. He grabbed the documents and the tape, stuffing them into his messenger bag. We can't stay here. My apartment isn't safe either. Where do we go? Liam looked at her. There's one place Silas Thorne never looks, because he thinks he's too good for it. Where? The sewers? No, kidding, Liam said, checking the back exit. Queens, my grandmother's house. Come on, we have a billionaire to take down. The safe house was a narrow, 2-story brick row house in Astoria, Queens, that smelled perpetually of oregano and lemon polish. It belonged to Liam's grandmother, a formidable Italian woman named Rosa, who asked no questions, only insisted that Ilara eat a second helping of lasagna. For 24 hours the world outside ceased to exist, replaced by the glow of laptops and the scratch of pens on paper. While Ilara slept fitfully on the pull-out couch, clutching her father's journal, Liam was at work. He wasn't just a burnt-out legal aid lawyer. He was a man with a vendetta, and he attacked the problem with the precision of a general. "Thorne controls the narrative," Liam said the next morning. He tossed a tablet onto the kitchen table. Ilara looked at the screen. A news anchor was speaking gravely. "Sources close to the investigation suggest the woman who disrupted the Obsidian Gala has a history of mental instability and stalker-like behavior. Thorne Dynamics has issued a restraining order." "He's painting you as a lunatic," Liam said, biting into a piece of toast. "So if you scream the truth, people will just hear madness. We can't just release the tape online. His bots will flag it as a deep fake and have it scrubbed in 10 minutes. We need an audience he can't censor, an audience he can't turn off." "The shareholder meeting," Ilara said. "Exactly." Liam pulled out a blueprint of the Javits Center. "Tomorrow at noon, the Thorne Energy Summit. It's his victory lap. He's announcing the Thorne-Vance battery, except he's dropping the Vance part. He's rebranding it as the Infinity Cell." Ilara felt a cold knot in her stomach. "He's erasing him completely." "Not if we stop him." Liam tapped the blueprint. "The event is high security. Metal detectors, facial recognition, the works. Graves will be there, and he'll be looking for you. He'll be looking for me. We can't walk in the front door." "So how do we get in?" Liam grinned. "We don't get in as guests. We get in as the one thing Silas Thorne never notices, the help." He slid a black ID badge across the table. It wasn't for Elite Serve, it was for Vector AV, the audio-visual company handling the event. "I called in a favor from an old client," Liam explained. "He owes me his freedom. You're on the roster for the setup crew. You're not Ilara Vance anymore. You're Sarah Jenkins, a lighting technician." "I don't know anything about lighting," Ilara said, fingering the badge. "You don't need to. You just need to carry cables and look busy. Your job is to get to the main control booth behind the stage. That's where the video feed is controlled. I've digitized your father's tape and synced it with the photo of the portrait. I put it on this." He held up a small, silver USB drive. "The presentation runs off a central server," Liam continued, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "You need to plug this into the main console. Once it's in, I can trigger the override remotely from the van outside. But you have to get it physically plugged in. And you have to do it while Silas is on stage." "Why while he's on stage?" "Because that's when the system is live, and because I want the world to see his face when his lies come crashing down." The plan was madness. It was dangerous. If she was caught, Graves wouldn't just throw her out this time. Silas had made it clear. Accidents happen. Ilara looked at the journal on the table. She thought of her father, tinkering in the garage, believing in a partner who would eventually kill him. She thought of the years she spent scrubbing floors, wondering why she wasn't good enough. She picked up the USB drive. It felt heavy, like a bullet. "Let's do it," she said. The morning of the summit was grey and rainy. The Javits Center was a fortress of glass and steel, surrounded by news vans and limousines. Ilara wore black cargo pants, a black polo with the Vector AV logo, and a tool belt. She had cut her long hair into a sharp bob and dyed it jet black in Rosa's bathroom sink. With a pair of thick-rimmed glasses and a baseball cap pulled low, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. She walked toward the employee entrance, her heart thudding against her ribs like a sledgehammer. "ID!" the guard grunted. Ilara held up the badge. The guard scanned it. A green light flashed. "Go on. Crew call is in Hall 3. She was in. The main hall was a cavernous space, buzzing with activity. A massive stage had been erected at one end, flanked by two screen towers that reached the ceiling. Technicians were scurrying up trusses, testing lights that could blind a pilot. In the center, a giant holographic display rotated the Thorn Dynamics logo. Ilara grabbed a coil of XLR cable from a pile and threw it over her shoulder. "Look busy. Be invisible." She navigated the backstage maze. The control booth was located on a raised platform directly facing the stage, accessible by a metal staircase. It was the nerve center of the entire show. "Hey, you!" Ilara froze. A man with a headset and a clipboard was marching toward her. "Jenkins, right? New girl?" "Yes," Ilara said, deepening her voice slightly. "We're short on hands for the teleprompter setup. Get up to the stage left wing and help tape down the HDMI runs. Move." "On it," she said, keeping her head down. She worked for 2 hours, taping cables, moving crates. Every time a security guard walked by, her blood ran cold. She saw Graves twice. He was prowling the backstage area, talking into an earpiece, his eyes scanning every face. He looked agitated. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. At 11:45 a.m., the doors opened. The hall filled with thousands of shareholders, journalists, and industry titans. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Music swelled, a triumphant orchestral score. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed from the speakers, "please welcome the visionary, the architect of the future, Mr. Silas Thorne." The crowd erupted. Spotlights swept the stage. Silas walked out, waving, looking every inch the benevolent god of industry. He wore a navy suit, his silver hair gleaming. Ilara was in the wings, hidden behind a stack of road cases. She checked her watch. It was time. She slipped away from her station and moved toward the control booth stairs. The booth was guarded by a single security officer, but he was distracted, watching the speech on the monitors. "The energy crisis," Silas was saying, his voice echoing through the hall, "is not a crisis of resources. It is a crisis of imagination. 30 years ago, I stood in a garage with nothing but a dream." Ilara crept up the stairs. She needed a distraction. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device Liam had given her, a high-frequency sound emitter. She tossed it under a table of catering supplies 10 feet away. Scree! A piercing feedback noise shrieked through the air. The guard clamped his hands over his ears and turned toward the noise. "What the hell?" He stepped away from the booth door to investigate. Ilara slipped inside. The control booth was a spaceship cockpit of blinking lights and mixing boards. 3 technicians were glued to their screens, managing the audio, video, and lighting. "Who are you?" the video director snapped, spotting her. "Get out of here. This is a restricted area." "Runner!" Ilara gasped, feigning breathlessness. "Graves sent me. He said there's a security breach in the system. He needs me to check the hardline." "We're in the middle of the keynote," the director hissed. "Make it fast." Ilara scrambled under the main console. She found the server tower. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the USB drive. It clattered on the metal floor. "What are you doing down there?" the director asked, suspicious now. On stage, Silas was reaching the climax of his speech. "And so, I present to you the culmination of my life's work, the Infinity Cell." Ilara grabbed the drive. She found the USB port. She jammed it in. "Liam, now!" she whispered into her collar. In a nondescript van parked 3 blocks away, Liam Cross hit enter. "Showtime," he muttered. Back in the Javits Center, the massive screens behind Silas Thorne flickered. The sleek, animated graphic of the Infinity Cell battery froze. Silas paused mid-sentence. He looked back at the screen, smiling indulgently. "A minor technical hiccup, folks. The future is complex." The crowd chuckled. But then, the screen went black. A chaotic static noise ripped through the massive speaker array, drowning out the polite laughter. "Cut the feed!" the director screamed in the booth, slamming buttons. "Go to black! Cut it!" "I can't!" the video tech yelled. "I'm locked out! It's an external override!" Ilara crawled out from under the desk, backing toward the door. The director lunged for her. "You! What did you do?" She shoved a rolling chair in his path and bolted out the door, jumping down the metal stairs just as the image on the screen changed. It wasn't a logo. It was the photo. 50 feet high in high-definition resolution was the portrait of Silas Thorne and Julian Vance. The same portrait that hung in Silas's private office. But this time, highlighted in a bright red circle, was the date on the newspaper sitting on the workbench. October 14th, 1998. And next to it, the text of the patent documents scrolled up the side of the screen, like the credits of a movie. Inventor, Julian Vance. Assignee, Julian Vance. The crowd gasped. The murmur turned into a roar. On stage, Silas Thorne looked like he had been shot. He stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the glare of the screen behind him. "Turn it off!" he screamed into his lapel mic. "Cut the power! Now!" But the audio system crackled, and a voice from the grave, filled the auditorium. "Silas wants to sell the technology to the military. I told him I'd burn the blueprints first." The silence in the hall was absolute. 5,000 people held their breath. "He threatened me today. He told me that accidents happen. If I don't come home." It was Silas. Silas Thorne stood alone on the stage, dwarfed by the image of the man he had murdered. He looked small. He looked old. Graves and 4 security guards were sprinting toward the stage, but they didn't know who to attack. The enemy was the building itself. Ilara emerged from the wings. She walked out onto the stage. She wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. She had ripped off the black polo, revealing a simple white t-shirt underneath. She took off her glasses and the cap. Her hair was different, but the face, the eyes, were the same as the man on the screen. She walked to the podium. Silas stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. Ilara grabbed the microphone. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. "My name is Ilara Vance," she said, her voice echoing through the massive hall. "The man you hear on that tape is my father. He didn't die in an accident. He was murdered for the invention you are celebrating today." Camera flashes erupted like a lightning storm. Reporters were shouting questions. "This is a lie!" Silas bellowed, finding his voice. He lunged toward her. "Security! Arrest her!" Graves leaped onto the stage, reaching for Ilara. "Freeze! FBI!" The shout came from the front row. A dozen men and women in windbreakers vaulted over the barricades, weapons drawn. They weren't Thorne's security. They were federal agents. Liam had sent the package to more than just the screen. He had sent it to the Department of Justice, the SEC, and the New York Times at 9 a.m. that morning. Graves stopped, raising his hands. Silas looked at the agents, then at the crowd, then at Ilara. The mask of the billionaire, the philanthropist, the genius. It crumbled. In its place was just a greedy, frightened thief. "It was business," Silas whispered, the microphone picking up his frantic muttering. "It was just business. He was going to ruin it." "He was weak. He was your friend," Ilara said, looking him in the eye. An agent stepped forward, turning Silas around and cuffing his hands behind his back. "Silas Thorne, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." As they led him away, Silas looked back at the giant screen. The photo of Julian Vance was still there, smiling, a soldering iron in his hand, looking at a future he would never see, but had secured for his daughter. Ilara stood on the stage, the lights blinding her. She felt a vibration in her pocket. She pulled out her phone. A text from Liam. Look up." She looked up at the control booth. Through the glass, she saw Liam standing there, giving her a thumbs up. For the first time in 15 years, Ilara took a deep breath, and the weight on her chest was gone. 3 months later. The rebranding of Thorn Dynamics was messy, but necessary. The board of directors, desperate to save the stock price, had settled with Ilara Vance for an undisclosed sum that financial analysts estimated to be in the range of $400 million. But Ilara didn't care about the board. She cared about the building. She stood in the lobby of the newly christened Vance and Thorn Energy. The giant portrait in the executive suite had been moved. It now hung here, in the main atrium, where every employee and visitor could see it. Underneath it, a brass plaque read, "Julian Vance, founder, inventor, father." Ilara smoothed her blazer. She wasn't holding a tray of champagne. She was holding a briefcase. She had used the settlement money to start the Vance Foundation, a grant program for underprivileged inventors who lacked the resources to protect their work. She walked out of the building, the revolving doors spinning behind her. A black car was waiting, not an ominous SUV, but a sleek sedan. Liam was leaning against it, looking considerably more polished than when they first met, though his tie was still crooked. "Ready for the meeting with the scholarship committee?" Liam asked, opening the door for her. "Ready," Ilara smiled. She looked back at the skyscraper one last time. It didn't look like a jagged shard of glass anymore. It looked like a legacy. She got in the car, and they drove off into the city, a city that finally knew her name. And that is the story of how a waitress took down a billionaire and reclaimed her father's legacy. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful someone is, the truth has a way of coming out, especially when you underestimate the people serving your drinks. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good underdog story, and subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss a new drama. What would you have done if you saw a relative in a billionaire's painting? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.